I want to talk about my journey with the Beatles through the decades. I'm not a baby boomer, so I couldn't have seen them on Ed Sullivan in 1964 because I was 1 year old. But I did discover them in the 70s. Um, in 1978, I went on a trip to Batavia, New York, and my hosts played I Want to Hold Your Hand on cassette in their car while we were recording somewhere. And it immediately caught my attention, but I didn't think much of it. And the next Christmas, now after that, the Bee Gees, who were big because of Saturday Night Fever, they made a Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie that I've still not seen all of yet. I saw part of it in the 21st century, but I didn't see it in the theater when it was new. I hated the Bee Gees at that point. But the theme song, and with a little help from my friends, was on the radio a lot. So I heard those. And the next Christmas, a friend of mine got the Red and Blue albums for Christmas, and he introduced me to the Beatles. And I didn't realize he'd had a Beatle haircut the whole time I'd known him. So anyway, he introduced me to them, and I was blown away by them, especially the Blue album stuff, and especially these. So Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was the first one I went out and bought because it was my favorite, had several of my favorite songs on it. And very quickly afterwards, I bought Magical Mystery Tour. I think it was almost instantly afterwards. There wasn't a very big time lapse at all between the two because Magical Mystery Tour had what was my favorite Beatles song for a long time, I Am the Walrus, on it. And has a bunch of my favorites on it. So these two were my only Beatles album for what seemed like a long time. These were my two favorites. But eventually I started expanding my horizons and got the White Album. And then I got Let It Be. The Red and Blue albums that my friend had told you which American albums each song was from, and a big chunk of them were from Hey Jude and Yesterday and Today. So got this, and then I got Abbey Road, and Yellow Submarine, and then Let It Be. Now, this is not the actual Let It Be I had in the 70s. This is actually the fourth copy that I've had. The first copy was a Capitol version. It came with, let's see if I can show you. These pictures were on the sleeve of the album. And there was also a poster with it that looked like the cover here. And so I had that, and I gave it away after I got hold of a copy with the Apple label on it, because I thought that was better for some reason. And then that copy got stolen, and so I didn't have it for a long time, and at least not my own copy of it. I copied it off of, well, I'll get to that. But when the new version came out, I got the 2-disc version of it for Christmas. I think it was 2021. And then I recently bought this. And this is actually an old version. This is the original version with the Apple label on it. So anyway, Let It Be. And then I went back and got Revolver because my friend who introduced me got it, and I liked what I heard on it. There were only 2 songs from it on the original Red album, and so it was a bunch of unknown songs to me, and I really liked it. The same friend after this, he got Yesterday and Today, which has become my favorite album. But at the time, I was so mad about all the songs that were redacted from Revolver and put on Yesterday and Today that I turned my nose up at it, didn't get it. But I did, the next one I got was the Beatles Rarities, which is a bunch of these, a lot of these rarities are not rare anymore, but I was really pleased that there was a new Beatles album out, even if it was rarities. This is the kind of stuff that would show up on Anthology, or has shown up on Anthology and Past Masters and on the box sets of various albums, so you've got most of it if you've been collecting more recently. But it was rare back then. And I did get a copy of the Red Album. I like the stuff on the Red Album good enough, but not enough to go out and buy my own copies of all the American albums back then. So after this, I moved. Actually, I moved after the rarities, and I got this after I moved. And then there was a station in Atlanta that would play with an all Beatles weekend. And they would play a lot of stuff from their entire catalog. I heard the stereo version of I've Just Seen a Face on there. I heard The Inner Light on there. I heard a whole bunch of stuff from the pre-Rubber Soul stuff. I think I did hear every single song from the pre-Rubber Soul selection from there. I also heard a bunch of the also, they played The Inner Light, for God's sake. That's a pretty obscure piece. That's on the rarities, by the way. But there were songs I didn't play on Rubber Soul I didn't discover till later. So, in the 80s, I listened to albums less and less. I started listening to cassettes. I had cassette players in my car. I didn't buy any cassettes of the Beatles during the 80s. I recorded them from albums and later from CDs. At one point, my cassette of Revolver messed up, and Seashed was backwards on the cassette, which I think John would have liked. Anyway, 80s was cassette era, and that continued through the 90s. CDs were too expensive for me. I didn't buy any CDs at all until around 1990 or so. No, actually around 95. I was still in cassettes. I did buy Anthology 2 and 3 on cassette, and I did listen to those. And then let's see what's next. Then in the year 2000, or actually 2003, I started buying CDs. I had a CD player in my car, finally. So I started buying the CDs. These were the 1987 mix of CDs. And I would buy one every 6 months and listen to it in the car. And the stereo sound on those, to me, sounded really good in my car. Started with Please Please Me, and then got 6 months later, got With the Beatles. 6 months after that, Hard Day's Night. 6 months after that, Beatles for Sale. 6 months after that, Help. At some point in the middle of this, I got the Beatles Love CD set, and because it had a surround sound version of it, I got a surround sound player, which angered my wife at the time, because I had been saying for years how much I missed surround sound, because I'd had that on my TV in the 90s. Anyway, I moved in 2008. At that point, I was listening to the White Album on CD, and my copy of that has disappeared. I'm not sure what happened to that. And I downloaded a copy of Let It Be Naked and Let It Be. So I didn't have my own copy, and I went out and bought a copy of Abbey Road. 6 months after that, I listened to Let It Be Naked for 6 months, and then Abbey Road for 6 months, and then Let It Be for 6 months, and I was overloaded on Let It Be. And so then, after that, I was going to listen to the solo stuff for 6 months, but it just made me sad listening to the solo stuff after that long of listening to Beatles stuff. And so I kind of let the experiment lapse for a few years, and then by then, the 2009 mix was out, and I had a copy of all of those in download. I didn't have the actual albums, and I tried putting those on my iPod, and the sound quality of Please Please Me heard through earphones on my iPod was just awful, and I just kind of stopped. I did pick it up again in 2018, I guess it was. Starting with the White Album, and the 2000 mix of White Album was just horrible. It was too much bass, even on soft songs like Long, Long, Long. I just didn't like it. But then I got that. I was getting the movies. I got Yellow Submarine and Magical Mystery Tour and watched them a lot when those were in their 50th anniversary, and I wanted to watch Let It Be for the 50th anniversary, but I couldn't buy it anywhere that I could find. It was not available in new print, and I couldn't find a used copy of it. This was 2020 when people were locked in. I really would have liked to have Let It Be at that time, but I didn't. So I did get the new version of Let It Be in 2021, and then I moved back to America, and there was a used record store. So I started buying the American mono versions of the albums. I've been seeing a lot of advertisements for the mono set, and I really wished I'd gotten it. But I started buying the pre-Rubber Soul albums. I was waiting for a Rubber Soul box set. During this time, the Revolver box set came out, which I listened to it when it was new, and then put it away while I was listening to Meet the Beatles and the Beatles' second album, and Hard Day's Night, and Beatles 65 and Beatles 6. I would listen to all of these on the 60th anniversary of them, and I really wanted a Rubber Soul box set at that time. It was the 60th anniversary, and I did get a collection of the CDs of the American albums, and so right now my listening consists of, I listen to records at home. Almost every night I listened to stuff from 60 years ago, and some modern stuff too, which would include the Beatles album from 60 years ago. I also have downloads of all the songs, and I put those on my phone so I can listen to them with earphones, or I can plug them into my car and listen to them in my car. But our car has a CD player still, so I also put a CD player in the car, and I make playlists of stuff from 60 years ago that I listened to, and seasonal playlists, which I use for long trips in the car. But if I'm just tootling around town, I listen to the CD of the Beatles from 60 years ago. So I had the CD of Rubber Soul, when it came out, but I didn't have the album. And in this time, I got a good record player so I could hear the good stereo. So I bought an old 70s copy of Rubber Soul. This is the stereo mix. I don't have the mono, but my 6 months of Rubber Soul was starting to run out, so I went ahead and bought this used. I gave up on there being a Rubber Soul set, and those 6 months passed. The time of Rubber Soul passed, and it was time for Yesterday and Today. I started listening. I have that in both mono and stereo. I started listening to those records, and now is the time of Revolver, and so I've got a good quality set of Revolver. The new mix of Revolver. I've got the big box set from 2023. It's Revolver time. But so I gave up on the Rubber Soul box set and just recently bought the new mix, or the 2009 mix of Rubber Soul in a high quality format, a high quality pressing here. And then less than a month later, they announced the Rubber Soul box set. So this is why I'm both angry and overjoyed at this new Rubber Soul box set.